Retro.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, voice of Hera and Rook Cast, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continually unexpected.
Hello there, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we hope everyone is getting ready for a great Thanksgiving. We are going to start our festivities by getting into another edition of Ask Me Anything Star Wars. But before we start with the questions, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are?
Absolutely. We are on Facebook and Instagram, conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
Okay, the dish is aligned, the signal is boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, and we're now broadcasting to the galaxy. So if I've done this correct, this episode is coming out the day before Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving Eve to everybody. I know we talked about this a little bit offline before we recorded this episode, Jay, but you got big plans for the holiday?
No, we're just visiting family. So this will be the first year that we're actually traveling as opposed to just going next door. So we're just making a little bit of a change so that some of our relatives that have to drive further don't have to drive quite so far. My oldest son being one of those. So I'm grateful that he doesn't have to drive quite so far. So, but yeah, and of course we'll probably watch some football and, you know, work off that tryptophan at some point. But how about you guys?
Oldest son and new daughter-in-law. So it's pretty good
Yes.
this time around. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, we're having family in. I've got family coming in from out of state. I've got in-laws that are nearby that'll be there. So it'll be about, 9 or 10 of us around. And instead of doing turkey, we were doing a brisket. So I'm going to be up early that day. I got a turkey trot that I'm going to be running. I'm sure there'll be a post on Instagram. So if you want to check that out, you can find me at DJ Keithley on Instagram. But yeah, football. It's going to be cold, so I'm sure I'll have a fire going and just enjoying the day. It's a great sit around, eat some food, eat some more food, have some dessert, have a few beverages, watch football type of a day, enjoy the company type of thing. So it's fun
Nice.
every year, right?
Awesome.
Okay. Well, we hope everyone has a fantastic Thanksgiving, and let us know what you're up to on any of the social media contacts that we'll share later here, especially if you're doing anything Star Wars. So I know a lot of people have Thanksgiving Star Wars type plans. But so yeah, this is again one of our Ask Me Anything episodes. We've done this sporadically. It seems like every few months we do one of these, and this is just a show that doesn't really have a theme. But Jay and I think of some questions, and then we take turns asking them to each other, and we just kind of discuss what's out there. Some of them are silly, some of them are thought provoking, some of them are just kind of what if type stuff. So yeah, here we go. I'm going to give myself the first question because I'm selfish that way. But
Go
Jay,
for it.
speaking of Thanksgiving, if you had to serve any one food from the Star Wars galaxy for Thanksgiving dinner, what are you going to choose? And if you're feeling especially bold, how would you design a Star Wars Thanksgiving dinner?
Oh, I like this. So there's one piece of food or piece of food, type of food that is mentioned quite often. And I always think, I wonder what that would be like because, we get scruffy looking Nerf herder and then we talk about Nerf steaks. And I mean, I love me a good steak. So I would probably have to go with a Nerf steak and to, have some really exotic, fun spices from, different parts of the galaxy that maybe I could experiment with or do some sort of a marinade or, like you do with your briskets, do a rub or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I'd like to try that. And then I would also love to have some sort of like a Shura fruit cheesecake, maybe. And the
Oh, there you
Shura
go.
fruit is, so to jog everybody's memory, is the fruit that Anakin kind of force propelled over towards Padme in episode 2 and said that Obi-Wan would be very grumpy if he knew that he was doing that kind of thing. So I think that would be a lot of fun. And then what was the second half of the question?
No, you're basically answering it. Just if
Okay.
you were going to design a Star Wars Thanksgiving dinner, what all would you include?
Yeah,
But
so there's that. Yeah, and
Mhm.
then I would probably also want to have some sort of fun beverage of some kind. I wouldn't definitely wouldn't want to go with the blue milk. I mean, that one's kind of overdone. But I mean, if we're gonna go for really classy, serving up some Tanqueray wine
Yep,
from Alderaan.
that was on my list as well.
Awesome, awesome. So
Yeah.
what about you?
Well, it's funny because we've been discussing the episodes of Visions, and one of the ones that we just discussed recently was Yuko's Treasure, which is I didn't particularly like. And that, if you don't remember, is the one that has the big droid bear Billy that's looking after Yuko, the orphan, and he's got that big oven in his stomach. Well, he pulls a roasted Nuna out of it, and I remember when I saw that, I was like, "That looks like a roasted turkey." And so that, and then with Thanksgiving coming up, that's what made me think of it. So I'm because it looks like a turkey, I'm basically building my menu around that. And I was having a hard time coming up with side dishes. And I'm with you. I didn't just want to serve blue milk. So I've come up with some sort of and I'm going to use this ingredient twice because I don't actually know what it tastes like, but I want something that's the equivalent of like a sweet potato. And so I'm thinking like maybe some sort of a macaroon dish out there.
Mm.
Whether you turn it into a macaroon sauce, like a cranberry sauce, or you turn it into, we always have sweet potato casserole, so maybe a sweet macaroon casserole, or just a sweet macaroon pie, and then you take the blue milk and make ice cream out of that and serve that with your pie.
Oh, look at
The way that
you.
some people do with, I know a lot of people just put whipped cream on pumpkin pie, but maybe some blue milk ice cream on top of the pie would be a way to go. And then, yeah, I always usually get a couple bottles of wine. So that Alderanian wine was tops on my list for the selection. Hard to come by these days, of course, but
Yes. Yeah.
still, it would make for a great evening and be wonderful for the toast at dinner.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think we'll stay away from port in a storm, though. That one could be a little volatile.
That is true. Very true.
Oh, that's fun. Okay, well, for your first question for me to ask for you, we'll keep it kind of lighthearted. I came up with some that were extremely deep this time, and then others that are just sort of lighthearted and fun. So, since we're starting lighthearted and fun, you and I both love our pets. So,
Mhm.
I was thinking if you could adopt a Star Wars creature as a pet, which one would you choose? So it could be weird, creepy, adorable, whatever you're feeling, and how would it fit into your everyday life? Cozy home, go on adventures, total havoc. What do you see for your pet?
Well, this answer changes, but I mean, I've thought about having like various Star Wars creatures as pets or mounts or whatever over the years. And I remember back in the 90s being enamored with the idea of the Witches of Dathomir riding Rancors. And I thought, how cool it'd be to have like a Rancor. But then it's like, what's the maintenance on a Rancor, right? I mean, where would you keep it? How much would it cost to feed it? I mean, it eats people in the movies, and obviously you're not going to feed it that, but you're going to be like giving a cow every day. That's just,
Right?
those things are enormous. And so who can afford that? So no, I'm not going to do that. Um, Other ideas that come to mind is, look, I mean, my pets are, so other ideas that came to mind include the Tuca cat, because it's small. We've actually seen them be pets in Star Wars. The only thing about that is that they seem to be like way more mischievous than the average cat. And I've had some mischievous cats in there. And they, also much, much, much sharper teeth on that. And so I don't just know how much of a liability those things would be, but plenty of people have had them. So I guess why not in that regard. And then the other one that comes to mind is a charhound, like
Mm,
Ember from
mhm.
the old Republic. But again, you want to talk about the liability. This thing breathes fire, and
Right.
I sure our listeners have heard my dogs, Loki and Zeb, a time or two in the background of this show, and they get all carried away and start barking. Well, all they need is one to slip and let some fire out, and the house is burning down. So this is my filibuster to answer your question. And yeah, I mean, I'm basically looking for something that's going to be a companion type of an animal. I mean, I'm thinking of, there's Rontos on and Dubacs and Banthas on Mos Eisley. I just don't need a mount. I want something that's going to be easy to take care of, not super expensive. So I think by default, it's going to be the Tuca. But what do you think?
Mhm. Mine is, and I've considered a few, so I'll tell you my runners up after this, but the Loth Wolf.
Oh
I
yeah.
love the Loth Wolf, and of course, we're both dog people anyways, but I mean, these things are huge. I mean, they're like Great Danes multiplied, but could you imagine being able to, take you through walls with them kind of thing
Mm.
and take you on different trips and whatnot, but they could definitely, I mean, could you imagine a Loth Wolf with the zoomies? That would
Hmm.
probably break the sound barrier, so, there's some things about that, but I mean, they're sweet, they're loyal, they're protective, so that would definitely be my number 1, and I just think they're so amazing. I mean, we got to see them in Rebels and all of the things that they're able to do, and I've just got a soft spot near and dear to my heart for any kind of dog. So that's my
Hmm.
number 1. But for just some fun things, I thought about the mini Nexu. Do you remember in Legends when the young Solo, oh gosh, now I can't think of her name. I had it and then I lost it. She had a mini Nexu, and it was Han and Leia's granddaughter. It was Jason's daughter. She had a little
Amelia or
mini
something like that.
Nexu.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I thought that would be kind of fun. But
I just thought that was a Nexu who hadn't grown up. I didn't realize it was a mini Nexu, but
yeah, yeah,
okay.
a little one. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And then I thought about having a Kowakian monkey lizard. That would be kind
Yeah.
of fun, but it 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 would definitely destroy your sanity, I think, after a
You
while.
would have to lock it up in a cage at the end of the day and like on the other side of your house and put soundproofing in so that it would just, you just imagine like 2 o'clock in the morning, whoa,
Right?
it just is carrying on. It's, or, comes in and creates mischief in your room. Yeah. That one could be troublesome for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
for
I
sure.
like the Loth Wolf idea. I mean, I've been talking Tuca, but the Loth Cat is the really what I was talking about there. So, I mean, you know, yeah, I mean, the benefit of the Loth Wolf is you want to go on vacation, no problem. You don't have any airfare to worry about. This thing,
That's
now
right.
you have to have a couple of them to get your family wherever you want to go, but still, they essentially go to Lightspeed. So there we are.
This is true.
Mhm.
So, yeah. All right, what's your next question?
Okay. Well, we kind of got into this subject on a recent news episode, and it stems from all the discussion of these various sequel trilogy related movie projects. But what would you rather see? The rejected Hunt for Ben Solo movie, the in development hell new Jedi Order movie featuring Rey, or some sort of team up movie that's been disguised as a buddy movie, bromance movie, whatever, featuring Poe, Finn, and Chewbacca.
Hmm. I would probably, well, I'm not just saying probably. I would definitely go for the Hunt for Ben Solo. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, there's so many different kinds of places that you could go, and we've talked about this before, on our news episode. And as far as being this scrapped Star Wars film that Adam Driver actually like tried to put out there, I think it could be a couple different things. It could kind of show us where the redemption arc could be for him. But like I said, I don't know how you would explain how he could come back. That's the only thing. But, I think there'd have to be a really strong creative team in order to be able to pull that off. But I
Mhm.
mean, apparently this script was actually pretty good. So, yeah, I mean, he definitely has some unfinished business, I think, for a lot of fans. And obviously, there's a lot of fan, thirst for it, if you will. And, I think that that's something that just goes to show that it's a character that really has resonated with a lot of people and people have kind of rallied around it. And so he's got a lot of emotional weight. And I just think that that would be really cool. But I mean, there's definitely some narrative risk there. There's some, I guess, continuity concerns there. So it would be, I think if it was done correctly, I would love to see it. That'd be my pick.
Yeah. So, I mean, that had Steven Soderbergh. attached to it. He was helping with the script. He was going to be the director for the movie, producer, whatever. And this is no lightweight. I mean, he's won an Oscar, done Sex Lies and Videotape, Traffic, Aaron Brockovich. He's got plenty of skins on the wall, so to speak, with the things that he's been able to do. And here's the thing. My answer to that question, I think, is the same as yours. And frankly, when we first talked about this movie, when it came into the news, is like, I was not crazy about the idea for that very reason. It's like, well, why are we bringing Ben Solo back? And honestly, one of the things that bothered me is like, is this just to fulfill Reylo fantasies that are out there? And people can ship whoever they want. That's fine. But what if we're going to do Star Wars? I want an action movie. I want it to have themes in the Force. I want it to have, or tell the story of rebellions and things like that. And what little we know about this movie sounds like it was going to be intriguing. It was going to have some mystery to it. And if he ultimately crosses paths with Rey, fantastic. But I just didn't want it to be a vehicle to get Rey and Ben Solo back together, if you know what I mean. There needs to be a reason.
Totally.
What's that?
I said totally. I
Yeah.
100% agree.
He needs to come back to accomplish something. If it could be the Force has brought him back. Hey, Anakin was conceived by the Force. Anakin or the Force can bring Ben Solo back if it wants. He could have been cloned on Exegol for all we know. That's where he quote unquote died. Maybe his Force essence stayed around and some sort of cloning technique took over. Who knows what the situation is? You've got good talent there. Lucasfilm liked it. They were willing to do it, but it was Disney itself that said they couldn't do it. And so I've kind of come around a bit on that. I think it could have been interesting. Hard to judge without knowing more. I want to see another iteration of the Jedi. I really do. But the fact is, this thing was announced in what year? 2023? Was that when we had Star Wars Celebration in Europe, at London specifically?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, because it was the one right after Star Wars Celebration Anaheim in 2022.
Right. Yeah.
And they've gone through numerous script writers, and Daisy Ridley's saying that, has been on record saying that she's expected to see something imminently, and she's been taking more roles ever since this. So that just says to me this movie is no closer to getting done. And, the 3 movies they announced then were the Dawn of the Jedi movie that James Mangold was going to do, this movie, then Dave Filoni's movie out there.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's the only one I expect to see, because Dave is actually making content for Star Wars still at this point. But James Mangold keeps picking up other projects here. So, that's, and I remember at the time we were very excited, and that did not mean to get off on this tangent here, but here we are. When they announced them at Celebration, these were things I expected to see, as opposed to like all the other movies that kind of get quote unquote announced are not actually announced. They get leaked by people and then they never actually happen. But these were announced. So anyway, with that having said, I think if I was going to rank these 3 right now, it would be The Hunt for Ben Solo, a Finn, Poe, and Chewbacca movie, and then Rey's movie out there. And supposedly we got a trilogy, a sequel, post-sequel trilogy of movies. Wow, that was hard to say. Being developed by Kimberg. So I don't know. It just feels like the Rey movie is just not going to happen. But I'm intrigued by the idea for a Ben Solo movie. There could go a whole lot of ways and could be fascinating.
Yeah, no, I agree. And we were supposed to get the Old Republic was thrown around for a while too. That one I would
That
like to see.
was that was the guys that did Game of Thrones that were going to do something, and that
Mhm.
one goes back like 7 or 8 years when that one
Right.
was announced. And
That still intrigues me though.
yeah, it does. I guess here's the thing about that is like, instead we got the High Republic. Now, there hasn't been any movies, but it was an entire publishing initiative that has really defined another era of Star Wars. And then the Dawn of the Jedi type of thing, I feel like kind of supplanted that Old Republic thing. But if they're going to do Old Republic, let's be real. We want Darth Bane, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
Duh.
if they aren't going to do that, if it's good, it's good. But I mean, come on, that's what we want. We want Darth. But the other part of that is that if they do something drastically different, with that because the Darth Bane trilogy is Legends now, and they're going to want creative freedom. Are we going to be satisfied, or are we going to want them just to adapt our books?
Mhm. Yeah. Then
Yeah.
that's and we want it to stay true, but I mean, I could
Hmm.
also see them doing a
Yeah.
little bit more.
All right. Well,
Well,
I ranted
fun.
long enough. What's your next question?
No, you're good. So, all right, so I'm kind of going back and forth on this one. It's a very deep question and it has to do with the High Republic. I actually had a couple of different High Republic questions, but this one specifically. I was thinking about this a lot, especially as we wrapped up the High Republic. And obviously, the Jedi and their teachings were framed very differently in the High Republic versus the prequels. And I think there's some things that maybe the High Republic does just a little bit better in terms of traditional Jedi teachings than the prequels. Would you agree? Disagree? And what would you compare contrast between the two eras as far as like who did it better kind of thing?
Hmm. Thinking about that, you know, the thing about the High Republic with the Jedi is that at the very end, Keeve Trennis basically was saying things about the Jedi that we will get echoed in a lot of the content that is around the prequel trilogies. Kind of maybe mentioned a little bit in the prequels themselves, but it's more in all the publishing that's come around the prequel trilogy that she was unsure of her place and whether serving the Jedi was the right thing to do, whether that was actually the will of the Force, because they weren't meant to be an army. You know, they they retreated in on themselves. They went through the Guardian protocols, and she was afraid that what happens next time. Do the Guardian protocols go into force indefinitely? And we're leading armies and swinging sabers in anger, and so she kind of predicted what was going to happen in the prequel trilogy based on her experience with the High Republic. And so there's that. I think the other big difference between the Jedi of the saga and then the Jedi of the High Republic is that they all saw the Force a little bit differently, and really hmm, to me the other big difference is that what was the conflict in the High Republic. The Jedi were spurred into action by the Nile and Marchion Ro, who was essentially trying to kill the galaxy and call all life in it, as we come to
Mhm.
find out. And then in the prequel trilogy, there was a Sith that emerged, and he was trying to subjugate the galaxy. And it really was a situation where instead of really just trying to track down the Sith, the Jedi were leading a war not against the Sith as much as they were against the armies of the Separatists. And that's what changes. We were talking about this in our last discussion of Revenge of the Sith, that Yoda exiles himself and doesn't take part in the rebellion, and Obi-Wan does not really take part of the rebellion. He is they're focusing on one day defeating the Sith. They essentially adopt the Sith technique. They stay in hiding and then they wait till the right moment arrives to challenge the Sith, which is what the Sith did. They stayed in hiding, trained one another up until they were ready to challenge the Jedi,
Mhm.
and so, as opposed to leading armies. So I don't know that I have a great answer to your question now that I've babbled about this for a couple minutes. I think the High Republic, the Jedi were probably a more stable order because they've had so much peace, now no recent conflict, and maybe their motives were a little bit more pure, even though they didn't appear that way to Keeve Trennis and in that regard. But she did essentially predict what was going to happen based on her
They did.
experiences. So
Mhm.
anyway, what are your thoughts?
No, those are some great thoughts. And, and I hate to pick apart the prequel era Jedi, but as you mentioned, there's so much that's happened since the High Republic where, you have that line, we're supposed to be peace keepers of the peace, not soldiers. But
Hmm.
that's exactly what they end up being. And they end up not really serving their teachings as much as they do the government. But, the one thing that I picked out that was, I think, glaringly obvious, and we've talked about this a bazillion times, is the idea of attachment. In that, with the High Republic Jedi, they do accept attachment a little bit more, but in the prequel area, it's just you're feeling attachment, reject it, let it go. This leads to all kinds of shame and secrecy. I mean, obviously with Anakin, but they kind of in the High Republic, they treat it a little bit more almost like the weather, I guess. Like an attachment is something that can pass through you, that you can acknowledge it, process it, maybe not deny it. The masters even kind of address it a little bit more openly, and I think that that kind of created healthier Jedi. And we saw that even with Avar and Elzar, and the way that they were able to use their attachment for a greater good. So there's that. And then, there's also one of the things that I really loved about the High Republic is how they also treated failure as part of their kind of ethical and emotional like education. So
Mm.
if a Jedi, died or made a tactical misstep, they would sit down, analyze it, share their feelings about it, where I feel like a little bit more in the prequel era, mistakes are almost, I don't want to say necessarily hidden, but it's, even Mace said we need to instruct the council that we have lost our sight, kind of thing. Like I can't remember his exact words, but when they look at their abilities and the way that they process things. So, there's a few other examples too that I thought of, as far as like their philosophical engagement. And in the High Republic, there's a little bit more, and maybe we just don't see it in the prequels,
Mhm.
where they encourage Jedi to follow their dreams, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? So, like Reese Silas, for example, he was very happy doing what he was doing, but then he was thrown on the front lines, which ended up being a good thing for him. But then you also have way seekers, and you have this, and you have that, and I guess we just didn't see that in the prequel era. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Well, you said a lot there to respond to. One, with Kane Wayseekers, you had to be approved for that. I mean,
Right.
and the thing is, they would consider it, and they just wouldn't grant it to anybody. In fact, Renestra basically decided to come one, and she didn't ask for permission. She just went and did it in that case. So she kind of rebelled against that whole notion with the Jedi Order. Attachment, that's a word that I like less and less when it comes to Star Wars. And I think because it's something that Star Wars does not do a good job defining, other than to say it's just forbidden, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
they aren't consistent with what they mean about an attachment. And but they've been, and other times they've been very careful, because I remember in Rebels, Kanan is trying to get through to Ezra, and he's like, you have to be willing to connect. And a lot of people sat straight up like, oh no, attachments are forbidden. No, no, no. Attachments and connections are not the same thing. I think,
Right.
when I think of attachment, there's almost an unhealthy, it's not just having a relationship with anybody, because Anakin and Obi-Wan, and I know we talked about the novelization, that Obi-Wan realized that he was attached to Anakin. You can, any two Jedi can have a partnership. That doesn't mean they have an attachment. That means that they can be friends without being attached. I think the attachment comes in when you do what Anakin did, which is you put the well-being of someone, you prioritize it above like everything else, to essentially what's an unhealthy degree in this
Hmm.
situation. And
Hmm.
I don't think that's what Elzar and Avar were doing at all
Right.
in the High Republic. And I cannot remember all the dialogue, but when they finally decided to kind of indulge this relationship as Jedi Masters in Phase 3 of the High Republic, it was something that she wanted. But they, at the end, and spoilers for people who haven't finished the High Republic, in the Trials of the Jedi, the final book, here they are. There's a solution to dealing with Planet X and the Nameless that is going to require them to basically stay on this planet. They're not going to be contact anymore. They're basically giving up huge chunks of their relationship, but they were able to do so for the sake of the galaxy. And so, to me, there wasn't an attachment. There was a connection. There was a relationship. It had some of the aspects of what we might have considered like an attachment, like Anakin and Padme had, but it was different. It was completely different than what they
Hmm.
had.
Oh,
So,
for sure.
at any rate, it's the and even when it comes to Reese Silas, they dragged him out of his comfort zone, as you
Right.
pointed out. I mean, he wanted to be in the library, and then, his master took him to the front lines on this. And then he was sent into a mission on the Maxine station, and they, and he grew for it. His growth would have been stunted if all he ever did was stay in the library, but they made him get out there and realize his potential with these experiences. And he realized he was a better Jedi for it. And he was better able to find his way. But at the end, he was afforded some freedom to go after Aslan Rel in that
Yes.
regard. And
Yes.
so it seems like perhaps after all this conversation you and I just had, the biggest difference between the Jedi and the High Republic and the prequel era, or just the saga era, if you want to call it that, is that the Jedi Order, the Jedi Council, while they did have some say-so over who was going to do what, and they did have requirements for people, especially in a time of emergency, like what was going on with the Nile, they did consider whether someone was actually following the Force, the will of the Force, when they were letting them make their own decisions on
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like a lot of times during the saga, it's the prequels, it's we'll be the arbiter of whether or not you are following
Right.
the will of the Force. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, I think there's a clear difference there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, that's a great way to sum it up. You put
Yeah.
it perfectly.
Okay. Well, we only did 4 questions, but we just got through an entire episode. Those were more thought-provoking, or at least yours were very good. Mine provoked a little bit more discussion than I was expecting on that. So,
Sound a lot of fun.
yeah, okay. Well, that was fun, and I like doing these, and we'll have to start thinking of more questions to ask each other and do this again in a couple of months. We got a lot to get through in December, so we most likely will not be doing one of these then. But with that having been said, thank you all for indulging us and joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and this segment of Ask Me Anything Star Wars. We hope you've enjoyed the discussion, and if so, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the show on your podcatcher of choice. And once you've done that, doing us the favor of rating and reviewing the show, that just helps the thing grow, and really appreciate all that. If you want more episodes of Podcast Stars beyond what you're going to have on your podcatcher, head over to retrozapp.com. The entire catalog is there and goes back to 2019, and we've covered everything since then. Jay, you'll go ahead and remind everybody where else we can be found online and what those social media contacts are one more time.
Absolutely. If you want to keep the conversation going, you can check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And while you're sitting around the Thanksgiving table, you can always pass our Podcast Stardust logo around, and show everybody what you're doing there. And also check us out on our Pinterest boards. We got some new things coming up, especially with the holidays. So I have to update a little bit more, and you'll get some new shopping ideas and all kinds of fun stuff. And you can also check out our YouTube outlets, which include the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. And if you'd like to email us, you can do so at podcaststardust@gmail.com. Send us your questions. Ask us anything Star Wars. And when we have enough, we will put them together in a listener question episode. And last but not least, hit us up on TeePublic. There's a link in our show notes. With the shopping season coming up here, who wouldn't want a Podcast Stardust gift under their tree? So if you do happen to snag something, please let us know by snapping a picture and tagging us on our social media outlets. And also pass along that information to your friends as well.
All right. Upcoming on the show on Friday, we will be getting into some Revenge of the Sith trivia. And then on Monday, we are continuing our discussion of Volume 3 of Star Wars Visions. We've been having fun with that, so make sure you check those out. But with that said, thanks for listening to episode 970 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week and a great Thanksgiving. And until next time, may the Force be with you.